What if losing weight has less to do with willpower and more to do with what your gut does with what you eat? You can be counting calories, cutting portions, and exercising, and still feel stuck, bloated, sluggish, and unable to budge the scale. The common thread under many of those frustrations is low-grade inflammation and a microbiome that's out of balance. Today I want to walk you through 10 everyday foods that look harmless, often even healthy, but that research and clinical experience suggest can inflame the gut or interfere with metabolic signaling in ways that make weight loss harder. I'll explain the how, give a vivid everyday example, and offer a practical, consider this instead, you can try without upending your life. First, a very quick primer, so the list makes sense. Think of your gut as a second brain and an ecosystem at once. Trillions of microbes living on and inside you, helping digest food, training the immune system, and even producing neurotransmitters, most famously, large amounts of the body's serotonin. Roughly speaking, a lot of our immune activity is rooted in the gut lining. Some commonly cited figures say about 70% of immune function is associated with gut-associated tissues, and the gut produces a lot of biochemical signals that affect mood and metabolism. When the balance of bacteria shifts, what clinicians call dysbiosis, or when the lining becomes more permeable, substances that should stay in the gut cross into the bloodstream. One of those substances is lipopolysaccharide, or LPS, a component of the outer layer of certain bacteria. LPS is a powerful inflammatory signal. Small, repeated changes like that add up. More systemic inflammation, disrupted insulin signaling, cravings, and a metabolic environment that favors holding on to fat rather than burning it. Picture a protective mucus blanket along the intestinal wall. When that blanket thins, bacteria get closer to the cells, immune alarms sound more often, and the body shifts into a defensive, energy-conserving mode. Visualize the gut as a little brewery, too. When you feed the wrong organisms with refined sugars or processed starches, fermentation and gas increase, and the balance of that brewery tilts away from helpful microbes toward those that harm the lining or promote cravings. If this sounds relevant so far, and you want the full list, plus realistic swaps, subscribe and stick with me for the next few minutes. There's a practical checklist at the end you'll be able to use in the kitchen and at the grocery store. Before we dive in, 2 important safety notes. Individual responses vary. What triggers inflammation in one person might not in another. If you have diagnosed celiac disease, inflammatory bowel disease, severe symptoms, or complex medical conditions, consult a licensed healthcare professional before making major dietary changes. Also, some people advocate raw dairy for gut health. Regulations and safety vary by region, and raw milk carries infection risks in many places. Don't assume it's legal or safe where you live. Now for the list. For each item, I'll say why it often looks harmless, explain the plausible mechanisms by which it affects the gut or metabolism, give a concrete example you might recognize, and offer one practical mitigation to consider. Number 1. Processed meats. Bacon, hot dogs, sausages. These feel harmless because they're familiar, protein-rich, and often marketed as satisfying comfort food. The trouble comes from a couple of sources. First, many processed meats contain nitrates or nitrites used for preservation and color. Under high heat or certain stomach conditions, these can form nitrosamines, compounds associated with tissue irritation and cancer risk in specific contexts. Cite studies on nitrosamines. Second, high heat methods like pan frying or charring produce heterocyclic amines, HCAs, and polycyclic aromatic hydrocarbons, PAHs, which are reactive molecules that can damage cells and irritate the mucosa. Packaged sausages and cured meats often also include additives, extra salt, and hidden sugars that shift the microbial environment. Imagine a crispy strip of bacon sprinkled on a salad. It looks like a protein boost, but those charred edges and curing agents create small molecular insults your gut lining has to manage. Consider choosing minimally processed cuts of meat, limiting frequency, and favoring lower temperature cooking methods, baking or gentle pan cooking rather than high temperature searing. When you do eat bacon or cured meats, pick higher quality versions without added nitrates and keep portions modest. Number 2. Low-fat pasteurized dairy and many fat-free dairy products. These are often positioned as the healthy choice because they reduce calories and saturated fat, but they aren't harmless for everyone. Processing that removes fat concentrates milk proteins and sugars while stripping away the naturally occurring enzymes and, in some cases, beneficial bacteria that help with digestion. For some people, exposure to certain forms of beta-casein, commonly referred to as A1 beta-casein, can generate peptides like beta-casomorphin 7 that may influence gut function and inflammatory signaling in sensitive individuals. Evidence on A1 versus A2 is mixed and still developing. Flag for fact check. Fat-free yogurts, for instance, often compensate for mouthfeel by adding sugar or industrial thickeners that affect the microbiome. Picture a blueberry fat-free yogurt cup, marketed as light and gut-friendly. Yet it delivers a sugar hit plus additives and stripped-down fats that change how the gut handles the food. If dairy feels problematic, consider full-fat dairy from trusted sources in moderation, or try A2-labeled milk and full-fat plain yogurt with fresh fruit. If you live where raw dairy is legal and choose to explore it, do so only with full awareness of local regulations and infection risks. Otherwise, fermented options like kefir or properly cultured yogurt may be a safer route to get live cultures. Number 3. Packaged healthy foods. Granola bars, flavored yogurts, many plant-based convenience products. These items look harmless because they carry health-oriented packaging and buzzwords: whole grain, plant-based, gluten-free, or low-fat. In reality, they often rely on sugar, syrups, refined seed oils, emulsifiers, and stabilizers to achieve taste and texture. The combination of sugar and refined oils feeds sugar-preferring microbes and contributes to low-grade inflammation. The emulsifiers and additives can interfere with the mucus barrier and microbial balance. Think of a snack bar labeled natural granola with a long ingredient list that reads like a chemistry set. It's easy to toss into a bag and feel virtuous, yet that bar can trigger cravings later, promote fermentation in the gut, and subtly signal your metabolism to store rather than burn. The easiest mitigation: prioritize whole food snacks, an apple with a handful of nuts, plain Greek yogurt with berries, or a homemade trail mix. Read labels for sugar content and look out for long ingredient lists dominated by industrial oils and emulsifiers. Number 4. Emulsifiers and food additives. Polysorbate 80, carrageenan, xanthan gum, and similar stabilizers. These sound innocuous because they're there in tiny amounts and are used to make foods creamy or shelf-stable. However, animal studies and some lab work suggest that certain emulsifiers can erode the mucus layer that protects intestinal cells and can promote bacterial movement closer to the epithelium, which in turn triggers immune activation and low-grade inflammation. Cite animal study caution. In practical terms, that means some low-fat or creamy packaged foods, non-dairy creamers, salad dressings, refrigerated ready meals, can be more disruptive than their appearance suggests. Imagine a jarred low-fat salad dressing that pours silky and tastes great. Those stabilizers are doing the work. Consider cooking more meals from whole ingredients, choosing products with shorter, recognizable ingredient lists, and using natural thickeners like mashed avocado, plain yogurt, or small amounts of mustard or tahini in homemade dressings. Number 5. Alcohol. Alcohol doesn't always read as food, and many people think occasional drinking is a lifestyle neutral. Biologically, alcohol acts as a solvent that can damage the cells lining the gut and thin the mucus barrier, making it easier for LPS and other bacterial products to translocate into the circulation and trigger inflammation. Alcohol also alters the composition of gut microbes and affects liver metabolism, which in turn influences insulin sensitivity and energy regulation. Picture the habit of a couple of glasses of wine most evenings or frequent weekend cocktails. Over time, that pattern is more than social. It's a repeated chemical stressor on the gut and liver. Practical mitigation includes reducing frequency and volume, avoiding drinking on an empty stomach, and choosing lower alcohol options. For people with existing gut inflammation, limiting alcohol can be an especially meaningful early step. Number 6. Modern wheat and gluten-containing highly processed wheat products. For many people, wheat feels harmless. Bread, sandwiches, and baked goods are daily staples. While only a minority of the population has celiac disease, a broader group may have sensitivity to wheat components. Gliadin proteins in wheat can trigger zonulin release in some people, a compound that modulates tight junctions between gut cells and can increase permeability in susceptible individuals. Research suggests zonulin involvement. The problem is particularly relevant with modern, highly bred wheat varieties and processed wheat foods that include refined starches and additives, which can be more immunogenic or provoke symptoms. Think about the daily white bread sandwich, the pastry with a thick glaze, or the batter coating on many fried foods. Those are heavy doses of refined wheat proteins and starch. If you experience bloating, fatigue, or persistent digestive issues, a time-limited reduction of refined wheat, or trying ancient grains like einkorn or spelt, or naturally gluten-free grains, may reveal whether wheat is a factor. But if you suspect celiac disease, get tested before starting a gluten-free diet, because testing requires gluten exposure to be accurate. Number 7. Artificial sweeteners: aspartame, sucralose, acesulfame K. These are marketed as harmless, calorie-free replacements for sugar, and many view them as tools for weight control. The emerging picture is more complex. Several artificial sweeteners can alter the composition and function of the gut microbiome in ways linked to glucose intolerance or altered metabolic signaling in some studies. Some compounds may reduce populations of beneficial bacteria like lactobacillus and bifidobacterium, or shift the firmicutes, bacteroidetes balance associated with energy extraction and storage in animal and some human research, evidence mixed, flag for references. In everyday life, diet sodas, sugar-free desserts, and artificially sweetened coffee drinks are common traps. Mitigation starts with gradual reduction. Swap diet sodas for sparkling water with a lemon wedge. Use small amounts of natural fruit to sweeten yogurt, or simply cut back and retrain your palate away from intense sweet tastes. Number 8. Refined seed oils: canola, soybean, corn, sunflower, safflower. These are widely promoted as vegetable oils and can seem harmless or even healthy. The issue is that many of these oils are high in omega-6 polyunsaturated fats and are processed at high temperatures and with solvents, which makes them prone to oxidation. When oxidized, either during processing or through repeated high-heat cooking, these oils form lipid peroxides and other oxidized molecules that promote oxidative stress and can harm the gut lining. In addition, diets very high in omega-6 relative to omega-3 fats may promote pro-inflammatory signaling. Picture the crispy packaged crackers and many commercial salad dressings that list soybean oil first on the label. Those are often made with oils that have been industrially processed. A practical switch is to minimize ultra-processed foods that use these oils as primary ingredients and to cook with more stable fats for moderate heat. Extra virgin olive oil, avocado oil for medium heat, or butter ghee for some high-heat uses. While recognizing every oil has a smoke point and oxidation risk at extreme heat. Number 9. Fried foods, especially deep-fried items or foods fried repeatedly in commercial settings. Fried foods look like indulgences rather than health hazards, and most people don't eat them every day, but frequency adds up. Deep frying at high temperatures creates oxidized lipids, advanced glycation end products, AGs, and transposed chemical compounds that provoke oxidative stress and irritation to the gut lining. Fried foods also commonly carry heavy breading made from refined wheat and are often made in the seed oils just described, doubling the potential for mucosal and metabolic disruption. Picture restaurant fries, battered fish, or crispy fried snacks. Tasty and convenient, but frequently consumed, they can create a consistent source of oxidized fats and inflammatory compounds. Consider limiting frequency, choosing baked or roasted alternatives, or frying at home with fresh oil used sparingly and at controlled temperatures. Number 10. Sugar and refined carbohydrates, white sugar, white flour, high fructose corn syrup, and foods built primarily from them. These are perhaps the most obvious offenders, but their subtlety is in ubiquity. They're in cereals, sauces, coffee drinks, condiments, and healthy bars. Refined carbs rapidly feed sugar-preferring microorganisms. Certain yeasts like Candida and some Clostridia thrive on quick sugars, leading to excess fermentation, gas, and shifts in microbial composition. Repeated high glycemic loads also contribute to insulin resistance and systemic low-grade inflammation, and the metabolic signals generated favor fat storage. Think of a morning with a sweetened cereal, a sugar-addled coffee, and a mid-afternoon pastry. That's multiple hits of refined sugar in one day. To mitigate, prioritize whole food carbohydrate sources, whole fruits, legumes, intact grains, and pair carbs with protein and fiber to slow glucose absorption. Reducing liquid sugars and packaged sweets is often the fastest way to see improvement in cravings and energy. A couple of short science blurbs to pull into the ear of the viewer as bridges. Nitrosamines and HCAs are classes of compounds formed under certain conditions of curing and high heat. They're reactive and associated with tissue irritation or cancer risk in some experimental contexts. Flag for fact check. Emulsifiers like polysorbate 80 and carrageenan have been shown in animal models to reduce the thickness of the protective mucus layer and change bacterial proximity to the gut wall. This is mechanistically plausible, though human data are more limited. LPS, lipopolysaccharide, is essentially a bacterial component that, when it leaks into circulation, triggers inflammation and can be a driver of insulin resistance and malaise in vulnerable people. Taken together, these 10 items aren't each a guaranteed path to disease for every person. Instead, think of them as contributors to a perfect storm. If you regularly combine processed meats, packaged convenience foods, refined seed oils, frequent fried meals, high sugar intake, and the occasional night of heavy drinking, plus additives and artificial sweeteners, each piece nudges your gut microbiome and gut barrier toward dysbiosis and permeability. Those changes increase baseline inflammation, alter hormone and neurotransmitter signaling, and blunt the metabolic response you're trying to achieve through diet or exercise. In short, calories still matter, but the context in which those calories exist, the microbiome, the mucus blanket, the level of oxidized fats and chemical irritants, shapes whether your body stores or burns. Let me offer a short, composite example you might recognize. A patient I'll call Maya reported exercising 4 times a week and following calorie goals while struggling to lose the last 10 to 15 pounds. Her daily routine included a quick packaged breakfast bar, a salad with grilled bacon and store-bought dressing, a diet soda, and a fried snack a few times a week, plus occasional late-night drinking. When we removed the daily packaged breakfast, swapped homemade salads with simple olive oil lemon dressings, cut back the artificial sweeteners, and limited fried foods, she didn't see overnight miracles. But within 6 weeks, her bloating and cravings reduced, and her weight began to move. That's an illustrative example, not a guarantee, but it highlights how modest, targeted changes can reduce the cumulative inflammatory load. Individual results vary, And other factors like sleep, stress, medication history, or genetics also play big roles. So where to start? If you want a short, prioritized plan you can actually implement, focus on 3 high-impact changes first. 1. Cut down on packaged sugary foods and drinks. These are everywhere, and removing them reduces sugar-driven dysbiosis quickly. 2. Reduce frequent consumption of fried food and products made with refined seed oils. Swap to meals prepared with whole ingredients and more stable fats. 3. Read labels and reduce foods with long lists of industrial emulsifiers and additives. Prioritize plain, real foods, even if it means minor extra prep time. Start with 1 or 2 of these changes for 2 weeks and track symptoms: energy, bloating, cravings, mood, and the scale. Small, consistent improvements tend to compound. A few practical kitchen tips. When you shop, make the perimeter of the store your friend. Produce, whole proteins, and dairy are usually there. For pantry items, choose whole grain, minimally processed versions, and avoid long sciencey ingredient lists. When cooking, lower pan temperatures slightly to reduce charring and initiate less HCA formation. Opt for roasting, braising, or gentle sautéing. If you like convenience, set aside an hour once or twice a week to batch cook whole food snacks so you have easy options and won't default to processed bars. Hydration helps too. Sometimes cravings are partly osmotic or stress-related, and sipping water or herbal tea can break a momentum toward quick, sugary fixes. A few additional clarifications you'll want to keep in mind. For gluten and wheat, only a minority of people have celiac disease, and that diagnosis requires medical testing. For others, non-celiac wheat sensitivity is real for some and worth a time-limited trial of reduction if symptoms point that way. But don't self-diagnose severe conditions. For artificial sweeteners and emulsifiers, human data are still evolving. Many studies use animal models or high-dose exposures, yet the signals are concerning enough that a precautionary reduction often makes sense for people who are struggling. For dairy, some people do better on full-fat or fermented dairy, but raw milk carries legal and infection risks in many jurisdictions and is not universally safe. Check local regulations and medical advice before considering raw products. Before I close, 3 visual metaphors the editor might use to make this material clearer on screen. Show the gut as a second brain with neural-like connections communicating to the rest of the body. Visualize a protective mucus blanket along the intestinal wall, with harmless bacteria peacefully distant at first, and then shifting closer when that blanket thins. And use the little brewery image to depict fermentation, friendly fermentation versus overgrowth that causes gas and imbalance. Those visuals help translate the science into something viewers can feel and remember. To recap actionably, start with 2 changes. Drop obvious packaged sugars and reduce fried and ultra-processed foods made with refined seed oils. Read labels for emulsifiers and long ingredient lists. Pick whole food snacks and choose cooking methods that minimize charring and oxidation. If you suspect a specific food is a problem, consider a brief elimination trial while tracking symptoms, and consult a licensed provider if your symptoms are severe or persistent. Remember, individual responses vary, and there's no single food that causes the same effect in everyone. If this message landed for you, subscribe to stay with these practical, evidence-minded conversations. In the description, you'll find a downloadable checklist to help you spot the 10 items in your pantry and a link to our next deep dive, where we walk step by step through a week of gut-friendly recipes and grocery swaps. You don't have to overhaul everything at once. Start with 1 or 2 small, high-impact changes, notice how your body responds, and iterate from there. Over time, reducing the subtle daily insults to your gut gives your microbiome and your metabolism a chance to rebalance, making the rest of your healthy habits actually work better. If you have persistent gut problems, diagnosed conditions like celiac disease, or complex medical needs, Talk to a licensed healthcare professional before making big changes. Individual responses vary, and the safest path is one that's tailored to you.